this stage of the conference, many speakers have gone before. And I see, looking at the topics, that the issue of technology, digitalization of businesses have been covered in various parts. So what I'm going to present may overlap, and in that case you might find it boring or argue that it reinforces one or two points that were made earlier. It may build on some of concepts, I think particularly the previous speaker on the role of HR, which I think is quite key. That's what we're here for, isn't it? And then it may also provide some new insights. What I'm going to present on this topic is obviously from my vantage point. We all approach life from different angles. And where you stand and how you view things, you may have different observations. But what is very evident is the fading boundaries between the interaction of man and technology and how that challenges human discretion in the business world and in the world of work. So my kind of career has been defined by curiosity. And that curiosity can be defined or translated into two questions. Why are some companies more successful than others? Why in the same industry, energy, airlines, hotels, tourism, are there winners and losers? And equally, why within those organizations are there high-impact corporate leaders versus people who can't lead effectively? So I spent a lot of time researching companies that have failed, more than 300. Is it better if I stay in the middle here? Okay. 300 companies, studying the literature of why they failed, how they were recovered, research into 40 cases where I got into the engine room, into the black boxes of those companies to find out what went wrong, and companies that were successfully turned around, and involvement in taking companies that aren't doing well and building them into high-performance organizations. Within businesses is a value chain, and there's a core operational process, and a lot of digitization is happening by redesigning this value chain and automating the value chain. And in the process that we're doing that, we're doing two things from a negative point of view. We're creating unemployment because we reduce the headcount because the system starts doing more of the human work. And secondly, we're reducing human discretion. But there's also a positive side which I'm going to get to. And the third aspect is my own work in using artificial intelligence and developing artificial intelligence applications in the assessment of leadership potential and identification of high-impact corporate leaders. So with that background, let me just quickly look at why companies fail. And just one thing that I forgot to say when I started. This is meant to end into a kind of a discussion point. So I've got 20 slides, and I want to run through them actually quite quickly. But I want you to concentrate and just jot down things that are important to you that we can later ask questions on or start discussing. But bear with me so that I can get through these slides as quickly as possible. The research from the leading business schools indicate the following causes of failure. When you speak to management, they'll probably tell you that bullet point number 4, price competition down to the last one, are the reasons for their misfortunes. But what the research from leading researchers and authors in this field concluded is that inadequate financial controls and inadequate management is present in 75% of failing companies. And then look at bullet point number 3, the customer interface configuration. So if you haven't heard that word before, it is how we configure our businesses to interface with the market out there. So which companies do you like to deal with when you have to book travel? The ones that are simplest to work with, isn't it? So those who can translate their products and their interface with the consumer the best way are the ones that will get the business in that particular marketplace. And that is the aspect that I want to address as well today. But what are the most tried and tested corporate strategies? So I've identified 13 intervention strategies that top management teams use to govern the behavior of their companies and the direction of their companies. But not all 13 are equally successful. And I just want to highlight an underlying trend in these successful turnaround strategies. And that is the question of intellectual capital. So when you look at your business and you look at the market value of any business today in South Africa or in the world, on the right-hand side, you see the traditional financial assets or financial value. Usually companies today are sold or trade at like 1,000 times more than the actual asset value, physical asset value. Why is that? And that's an emerging trend in the last 30 years, that it's the intellectual capital that the shareholder buys. When you invest in a business, you've got to look at the financial capital, but you're really buying intellectual capital. What is intellectual capital? It breaks down into three. So I've looked at sort of 3 or 4 major theories and synthesized it into this one slide. It's human capital, it's client capital, and it's structural capital. Imagine you buy a company, and the day you arrive there, the workforce walks out the door. The whole DNA of that company is gone. That's your human capital. But there's also process capital. Under structural capital is your process capital. That is really where automation takes place. That's where you're taking the value chain of your business and you're automating it to create a better client interface and a better staff interface. And of course, client capital. I had a client in the Far East that said the following, such as he kind of reduced the complexity of business to one simple statement. He says, employ smart people because they create smart products and processes that attract smart customers that brings in smart profits. Simple. So it starts with us in this room, human resources, human capital. You've got to get that one right first. Another way of looking at this, to more clearly highlight the role of HR in this. And here I'm touching upon the previous speaker's role of HR, and I may be just putting another perspective on it. A high-performance organization has strong human capital, client capital, and process capital. But below that line, intervention strategies, research-based, those are the 5 of the 13 intervention strategies that I spoke about earlier that has the most impact on creating high-performance, sustainable businesses. So let's just talk about each one. Building the management team. I've just been the week before last at an international congress in London presenting a paper on how artificial intelligence is shaping the way we assess human potential. But the speaker before me presented research on 1,000 interviews of 1,000 CEOs worldwide. What are the 10 major challenges they face? What keeps them awake at night? Guess what number 1 was? Do I have a strong enough management team to take my company into the future? It was the nightmare number 1. The second one is, how do I attract the best talent in the market? The third one was competitive advantage and competitive edge. How will I keep my company competitive? But the 2 of the 10 most critical challenges has to do with us sitting in this room, human capital. So building a competent, high-quality, high-impact leadership team is one area where HR can have a huge impact. The second one is your high-performance companies have better performance management systems than others. They're better at building a culture that elicits the behavior that will lead the company to success. That's under human capital. Under process capital, their strategies are just a little bit better. And finally, process redesign. And that's where my presentation comes in terms of automation, because it's in the process redesign that you start automating the value chain. This previous speaker said, if there's one word that was probably used 50 times in that presentation, credit to that presentation, is why? Why do they downsize and then only involve HR? Why do they move offices and only then involve HR? Why do they implement a new system and only involve HR? So why aren't we at the forefront of that business planning? And when you look at those 5 things, from a thought leadership point of view, HR needs to get involved in that, not as an afterthought, but part of that thought leadership process of defining the new future of the business. So enough on intellectual capital. You'll see here that to build a sustainable business, it became clear there are 2 main actors in this game, in this drama. It's human capital and technology. And now I'm going to talk about the interface between the human capital and the technology. How they interface now and how they will interface into the future as we journey into the future will cause disruption. When you read some of the bit that's been written, some predictions are that 800 million people will become unemployed in the next 10, 20 years. Other predictions are that this new fourth industrial revolution will be so disruptive that it almost will produce civil unrest in certain countries. So let's just look a little bit at that. And you all know about the fourth industrial revolution. My talk is not about that. I just want to put a slide on to show you something. I kind of tried to summarize the 4 levels, but I want to focus on the 4th one. What are the key technologies that's going to disrupt and impact on us and the way we work in the future? It's blockchain, mixed reality, biotechnologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced materials. There are others as well. But the focus for me here is that the artificial intelligence and robotics are mainly going to impact on how our businesses will function in the future and our world of work. So just to just look at those technologies, it's the combination, it's the combined effect. When you combine artificial intelligence with biotechnology and advanced materials, you get things like heart rate monitors and implants that govern how the body functions and medication. When you get artificial intelligence and quantum computing and mixed reality, you get self-driving cars. It's a combination of these technologies that will disrupt, not one of them in its own right. So the artificial intelligence is the most critical one for us. So let's just look at this one. Artificial intelligence comes at 4 levels. At the most basic level is what we saw 10 years ago. These days we talk about, well, if you want to know more about that kind of thing, just Google it. Google hotels around Polokwane, and suddenly it comes up with all the hotels. That's sort of a generic calling up of archived information. No big shakes. The next level, or level 2, is like industry focused. You see it increasingly in the financial markets, where when you almost now go to some of the most advanced banks, they can almost draw a profile of, yeah, you shop at ShopRite and you shop at Woolworths and you buy clicks because they can track your credit card transactions. They know where you live, you know how much you spend on medical stuff, and they have a total profile. And that is sort of artificial intelligence at an industry level. The 3rd level is sort of eyes and ears, see and hear. Here you start talking about facial recognition and crowd control. We talk about immigration, where we're not going to have passports. You're just going to go and scan your eye, and your eye will tell them exactly what your address is, where you live, whether you're allowed to come into the country or not. And then you get robotics, which we see in motor manufacturing. If you look at the leading motor manufacturers, you don't see too many human beings drifting around their production plants. It's all robots. It moves on conveyor belts, and robots assemble the car. You can actually watch a car with all its parts right out in a matter of 2-3 hours. Robots build the car. And different industries are are at different levels. So now, how is human discretion being eroded? Because that's what's happening. So I looked at it from this point of view, discretion versus algorithm-based decision-making, because that's what artificial intelligence is. It's algorithm-based decision-making. So when you look at the data archiving, it's sort of your lowest level, that's your Google search. Then you get to systems-driven core processes in businesses, and then you get to AI. But can you see that graph going up? As we progress up there, the right-hand side, discretion is reduced. I just want to see if I can use this. Yeah. As you progress there, here, 50 years ago, the computer was invented, discovered 50 years ago by Alan Turing. From that moment on, human beings had total discretion. Everything that happened, we had to think about and do. As computers developed, our discretion got eroded. Erosion of human discretion and erosion of human participation. Those are the negatives, but there are advantages, which I'm going to get to. But I want to leave you with two principles on this matter, on how it impacts on jobs. The one is cognition and routine. So how will this impact the jobs? Jobs that are high on cognition and high on non-routine are least likely to be negatively affected by this, where jobs that are very routine and very manual are mostly going to be affected. So that's cognition and routine. Another concept is creativity and compassion. High creativity jobs with high compassion are least likely to be affected. What you could almost do is take your organogram of your business, and instead of doing job evaluation in terms of grading, evaluate each job in terms of cognition and routine and creativity and compassion. And you can almost put a percentage likelihood that that job will be automated or automated to some extent in the next 5 to 15 years. And it could be an interesting exercise to do, because that will tell you now, if you want to look at thought leadership as HR people, starting to present your management team with information on that could assist. So we talk about inequality. I call it the big divide. And we talk about South Africa as a hugely unequal society. And that is true and that is correct. But inequality is seen across the world in all sorts of economies. And the next slide will kind of show that. The beginning of that diagram is 50 years ago when technology started. And as technology, as computers advanced, as quantum mechanics advanced, as software development advanced, as bandwidth expanded, and computers started automating, it started creating that inequality. Because I see in your program, the other side is the actual magazine. There's a nice article that I'll paraphrase. Those who control the robots will control the world economy. So the people who design these systems, Microsoft software development, the Google networks, Facebook, all the stuff we use, the cell phones we use, they actually dictate how the world economy will work. The problem there is that the equality gap, if we think it's bad now, it's going to increase. And it's not going to be across national lines. It's going to be a worldwide trend divided by skill, because some people, unfortunately, will be trapped in low literacy, low numeracy, high routine jobs. And that brings us back to education in South Africa. It's education, education, education. We need to get people to have a minimum level of literacy so that they can start participating. But they're good news. What's the good news? And I think I just have these two slides still, then we're going to be going to questions. Globalization of best practices. So what happens is, to me, technology is the fairest, most unbiased phenomenon in the world today. It doesn't know race, age, gender, or ability or disability. It's just neutral. Okay. But as best practice, let's take finance as an example. We get SAP Financials, Oracle Financials, Sage Accounting. As these big business processes are translated into computer systems, it's sweeping the world like a tsunami and changing it. And we can't say we don't want to participate in it. It's just going. I mean, who doesn't use PowerPoint? Who doesn't use Excel? You'll find it in China, you'll find it in Hong Kong, you'll find it in Taiwan, you'll find it in South Africa, you'll find it in Ghana, you'll find it in the UK. It's a best practice, and everybody tunes into that. And that is one of the advantages, because irrespective of which country you reside in, you will get trained in the best practice HR system, the best practice financial system, the best practice logistics system, the best practice travel booking system. And that skills you up, and it helps you to participate in this economy that's coming down. But it also globalizes employment opportunities, because whatever economy you reside in, should you now transfer to another business in another country, you hit the road running, because if you can use Oracle Financials and you join a company in another country that uses Oracle Financials, you're productive on day one. It's nothing new. You've actually been upskilled in this. So that's a big advantage in terms of employment opportunities. The other thing is that we see ecosystems as the South African economy. Okay, this economy, that economy. Can you hear? Is that okay? But more and more, we belong to an ecosystem of HR professionals worldwide, and we tune into these mega systems that will actually control the behavior of companies and people. And the final one is fast tracking of employment, the reduced speed of onlining an employee. So I want to just use two examples. 20 years ago, if you had to export something across the world and you phone an export company, you'll need to speak to somebody with about 20 years experience in terms of, is it dangerous goods or not? What custom papers do I need? What shipping line do I need to use? When will the ship go? What's my transit time? Now all of that's automated. I can now put somebody in there with 3 years experience or 4 years experience to do the job that somebody previously needed 20 years for, because the system drives the behavior and drives the information. So that is the positive side. And that's good news for emerging economies, because we can upskill and we can train people and lift them into this new economy much quicker than we could have lifted people into meaningful jobs 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that is the positive side. And that, I think, is the end from me. And now I think we're more open to discussion points, and I hope I didn't take too long. Okay. Thank you.